Sometimes justice doesn't come through the front door. Sometimes it comes in silently, and before you know it, it's too late. This is the kind of story that begins like any other. An ordinary evening, a casual dinner, and an irreparable mistake. But what nobody knew is that the woman they humiliated that night was the only person capable of destroying the entire system, legally. Stay until the end, because what you're about to hear will make you rethink every look you've ever ignored, every silence you've ever allowed, and every injustice you've seen and silenced. The city seemed to take a deep breath before the storm. The clock struck 8:17 in the evening. A busy restaurant in an upscale neighborhood with background music and waiters hurrying about, people laughing, ordering wine, taking selfies with flashbulbs, nothing out of the ordinary, until she walked in, alone, black coat, low heels, a navy blue scarf around her neck, and eyes that said, "I watch everything." Her name was Sarah, 53 years old, a prosecutor for over 25 years, a specialist in crimes against public administration, silent, lethal, and invisible. At least, that's what they thought. She was greeted with indifference. The maitre d', a young white man, looked at her like someone measuring an intruder. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a menu. He just said, "Reservations are full, ma'am." Sarah replied in the calm voice of someone who has seen the world bend for much less. "I called. My name is on the list. Sarah M." He hesitated. He fiddled with his tablet. He swallowed and forced a smile. "Ah, yes. I'm sorry. Of course. Right this way." Sarah sat down at table 12. She ordered tea. She opened her leather briefcase. Inside were 3 classified documents. 2 statements from whistleblowers, and a search warrant. That would change everything. But before the waiter could bring the drink, 2 security guards approached. Big, uniformed men. 1 white, 1 Latino. And the look in their eyes said what words could not. "You don't belong here." "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us." "For what reason?" she asked, still sitting down. "We have a report that someone is trying to run a scam in here. Fake document. Management asked us to check it out." Sarah looked at them for 2 long seconds. Then she looked at the maitre d'. He was now avoiding her face. And he was talking on his cell phone, nervously. "Do you want to see my document?" "Yes." She took out her functional wallet from her handbag. Gold lettering in high relief. Public Prosecutor's Office. One of the security guards frowned. The other took a step back. But they didn't back down. "This could be a fake, too. Stand up, please." She sighed. She closed the folder and stood up. "I'll go out with you, yes. But you know, your choice has just cost you dearly." On the sidewalk, she was slumped against the wall. Hands behind her, and the handcuffs came on, stiff, cold, humiliating. Some people filmed, others just looked away. The maitre d' watched from afar and smiled. Sarah didn't resist. She didn't scream. She just looked at the security camera at the top of the building and smiled back. But hers was a different kind of smile, the kind that precedes an earthquake. 2 days later, the restaurant was closed, the manager's bank account blocked, 3 arrest warrants executed, and the press? It exploded. Prosecutor is handcuffed while trying to have dinner and arrested 2 days later. Dossier reveals network of corruption between businessmen, politicians, and private agents. Restaurant was front for millionaire money laundering scheme. But that was just the beginning. The next morning, before the sun had risen, Sarah was already up. She didn't sleep, she planned it. As the city turned off the nightlights, she lit the dots of the puzzle, and each piece led to a name, each name to a function, and each function to a flaw. What nobody knew was that Sarah wasn't just a prosecutor. She was the coordinator of a special task force, silent, invisible, implacable. And that restaurant was not chosen by chance. She knew. She knew there was something strange there. She knew that this place was visited by people who would never appear in an ordinary salon. Ministers, judges, businessmen, names that should never meet in secret. She just wanted to confirm it. But what they did accelerated everything. They signed their own sentence. In the briefcase they took that night, there was more than a warrant. There was evidence, statements, eavesdropping, maps, international transfers. And now, with the incident filmed and viralized, Sarah had what she needed: public attention and legal cover to act. By 9 a.m., her office was packed. 3 federal delegates, an assistant judge, 2 revenue agents, and on the table, the complete map of a corruption and laundering scheme that involved construction companies, politicians, and the presidency of the local court of justice. And at the center of it all, the restaurant where she was handcuffed. What nobody imagined was that Sarah had been investigating this for almost a year, and that the dinner was just the endpoint. In less than 48 hours, the first orders were issued. The owner of the restaurant was arrested outside the airport. A parliamentary aide tried to flee across the border, and a retired magistrate was found destroying documents in the basement of a house that was not in his name. But Sarah didn't smile, nor did she celebrate. She knew that was just the surface. What lay beneath was even more rotten, deeper, more protected. And what she would do next wasn't just for her. It was for all those who had been shackled for no reason, silenced for daring to occupy a space that they said wasn't theirs. Ignored, ridiculed, accused, expelled, Sarah wanted more than justice. She wanted structure. She wanted reform. She wanted the truth ripped out with the teeth of the system. On the morning of the 3rd day, a phone call changed everything. An anonymous voice, serious, precise, no accent. "Prosecutor Sarah, you've gone far enough. You know you've touched where you shouldn't have. Take a step back, or the next dossier will be about you." She didn't answer. She just hung up and smiled. Because when they threaten, it's because they're already bleeding, and she was just getting started. 3 days after the humiliation, Sarah had already taken down 4 important names. But that was just the floor of the structure. The ceiling was still untouched. And she knew it. Because when you expose the little ones, the big ones watch in silence. But when you start touching the big ones, the silence becomes a threat. She already felt it. In the unanswered messages, the averted glances in court, the calls that went straight to voicemail. Isolation came quickly, for those who dared to go too far. But Sarah wasn't inexperienced. She had felt this isolation before. When she was the county's first black prosecutor, when she refused invitations with implicit favors, when she reported a judge for bullying and was ignored. She knew what was coming, but this time, she wasn't willing to back down. On the morning of the 5th day, a new document arrived in her hands. Sealed, no sender, just 3 words typed on the cover. "For you to stop." She opened it. And inside, photos of her 13-year-old nephew, of the journey between school and home, dates, times, details. It was a message, clear, cruel, cowardly. Sarah took a deep breath. She picked up the phone. She made just 2 calls, the first to the Federal Police Internal Affairs, the second to a journalist. That same evening at 9:17 p.m., a video was published, 4 minutes long. No cuts, no face, just Sarah's voice. And in the video, she didn't accuse. She explained, line by line, how the network of corruption involved high-ranking magistrates, how the money circulated between political campaigns and front companies, and how, in recent days, she had been the target of threats, not out of revenge, but out of fear. And she ended the video by saying, If anything happens to me or anyone in my family, the rest of the material will be released automatically, and no one, absolutely no one, will be protected. In less than an hour, the video was everywhere. Newspapers, private groups, cipher messages between judges, messages of support between activists, embarrassed silences in the corridors of power. The next morning, Sarah was summoned to an emergency meeting. President of the court, the chief prosecutor, and 2 retired ministers, all with faces too serious and too many false words. We are concerned for your safety. Perhaps it would be prudent for you to step away from the case temporarily. We don't want this to compromise your integrity. Sarah smiled, a short smile, and replied, Your integrity is already compromised. Mine is intact, and it will stay that way until the end. She stood up, and before she left a USB stick on the table. That's a copy. If I disappear, another 5 will be handed over. One of them is in the hands of the press. The silence in the room was absolute. The fear, palpable. War, declared. That night she returned home under escort, but something was wrong. The gate was ajar, the porch light on, and her nephew's backpack lying on the floor. Sarah ran, the door ajar, the dead silence, and an envelope on the table. She opened it. Inside, just a handwritten note. Your steps are being watched. Tread carefully. She closed her eyes, and there, in the middle of the room, she made a promise. You won't shut me up. You will listen to me. And if I fall, I'll fall screaming your names. She was no longer fighting for justice. She was fighting for survival. And survival is a form of justice. 12 hours after the threatening note, Sarah knew she was in for a countdown, not to her death, but to the collapse of an empire. Theirs, not hers. She had grown up among threats. She had learned to translate silence as danger, and now every move had purpose, every breath, strategy. While the country commented on her video, while journalists tried to find out what was on the USB stick, Sarah was already 10 steps ahead. She wasn't going to wait for a warrant. She wasn't going to beg for security. She was going to do what the system never knew how to do on its own. Act. She called a closed hearing. Emergency. No press. No cameras. But with names that made walls shake. 3 prosecutors, 2 judges, and a federal judge. They all knew what was at stake, but none of them knew what she was going to present. When the session began, Sarah was on her feet. No robe, no makeup, no shield, just her, and a black briefcase. She didn't give a speech. She opened it. Documents, transfers, audios, prints, recorded confessions, voice messages between judges, politicians, and businessmen. And at the center of it all, a name that no one dared utter in public. But she said it out loud, without trembling, without flinching. The name of the President of the Court of Justice. One of the judges coughed. Another lowered his eyes. The oldest prosecutor crossed his arms, and the youngest smiled. But it was that smile that Sarah never forgot. The hearing ended in silence, but she knew that in there sat a traitor, and she would find out who. That same evening, a message was intercepted. It came from a hidden number to a contact with advanced encryption. A single sentence. She has the recordings, and that's how Sarah found out. One of them handed them over. One of them passed on the information, and now she was alone. Again. The next morning, something even more serious happened. Her nephew disappeared. He left for school. He never arrived. Sarah's world stopped. Nothing else mattered. Nothing. She called everyone. She called the police. She posted it online. But it wasn't until she returned home that she understood the message. There was a red envelope on the door. No sender, no addressee. Inside, a USB stick. She plugged it in. And there, a video. Her nephew, sitting up, scared, but unharmed. Behind him, a white wall. No windows, no landmarks. And a voice in the background, cold, without emotion. It said, "You have 48 hours to destroy all the files, terminate all actions, and disappear, or the boy disappears." Sarah cried. But she didn't break down. She knew that's what they wanted, to make her afraid, to make her retreat. But she didn't do any of that. She picked up the phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Her brother, the boy's father, a former international security agent, aloof, silent, unpredictable. She didn't explain. She just said, "They've taken your son." And he replied, "I'll bring him back." In less than 6 hours, tracking began. Within 8, they had a location. Abandoned shed, industrial estate, no official surveillance. Sarah wanted to go, but he said no. "If you go in, they win. If you stay, I'll bring him back in one piece." And he did. 22 hours later. No injuries, no explanations. Just a note pinned to the child's jacket. "You won this one, but don't play the whole game." Sarah read it and tore it up, piece by piece, word for word. And at that moment, she decided. There would be no more deals, no more shadows. She was going to blow up the system, from the inside out. And the first bomb would be detonated in front of everyone. The next morning, the country woke up differently. On cell phone screens, a warning. Live on national television. "The judge who defied the system speaks today at 10 a.m. This was no ordinary pronouncement. It wasn't an interview. It was a summons. Sarah entered the court building unescorted. No makeup, no script, with a briefcase, and inside it, the end of an era. The hall was packed. Cameras, reporters, citizens, survivors, and onlookers. On the other side of the corridor, in closed rooms, the men who had always decided everything in silence were watching, terrified. Sarah sat down, not in the judge's seat, but in the center of the hall, as a citizen. She breathed. She closed her eyes and began. For 30 years, I've seen people begging for justice. I've seen victims treated as guilty. I've seen guilty people protected by ties, acronyms, and walls. She paused. The cameras adjusted. The eyes of the country were on her. Today, I hand this over to the people. She opened the folder. Documents, audios, videos, everything. The pen drive, the original, the undeniable. On the screen in the background, faces appeared. Judges, prosecutors, businessmen, members of parliament, all appointed, all connected. No one could deny it anymore. Because the people were watching. The country was watching. A journalist whispered in the background, "It's a political massacre." But it wasn't. It was the birth of a new era. Sarah continued. "I've been threatened. I've been assaulted. I was betrayed by colleagues. They tried to silence my voice, cut my hair, take my family away. But I'm here, standing up. Not for me, but for everyone who has been crushed by the silence of justice." The people in the room stood up. No one asked them to, but the body reacts. It's as if the whole country understood at the same time that woman wasn't there to make a speech. She was there to turn the page of history. She closed. "This system is no longer yours. Now it's ours, and it starts today. With transparency, with truth, with courage." She handed the folder to a reporter. She gave copies to 3 NGOs. She handed it to the people and left. No applause, no waving. She just walked out. Meanwhile, the world watched. Hours later, the first warrants were issued. 15 preventive arrests. The president of the court resigned. A judge was arrested trying to flee the country. The justice minister was silent. The top brass trembled, and in the streets, people hugged each other. They screamed. They cried. Someone wrote on a banner, "It wasn't a judge, it was a revolution." Sarah watched it all from home, with bare feet, her hair growing again, her nephew asleep on the sofa, and the silence. For the first time, was one of peace. She smiled, but she didn't celebrate, because she knew that revolutions don't end with applause. They continue the next day, and hers had only just begun. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, take a deep breath, then share it. Not because it's a script, but because it's a mirror. And maybe someone close to you is waiting for the courage to turn the page. Like it. Comment. And remember, justice doesn't start in court. It begins in us.